When you think of making a list that has places from all over the world, you have to be precise, because who knows what you might find at some remote place somewhere at the end of the Pacific. Luckily for this one, it's quite straightforward. It's evident that some countries would have cities that are more expensive to live in, compared to the cities of other countries that are underdeveloped or just about developing. We're going to be looking at data from two surveys, one of 2020's Mercer's Cost of Living List, the Economics Intelligence Unit's Cost of Living List, both of which have given us almost identical data. Let's look at the top 10 most expensive places to live in the world. Here we go. At number 10, we have Beijing, China. Coming in at number 10 is the capital city of the People's Republic of China. Beijing has seen some incredible developments in the 20th century and is probably one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world. Why wouldn't it be? It houses over 20.5 million residents and caters to the crucial decision making that the government has to formulate for the most populous country in the world, China. According to the stats, the average price per square meter is around $16,000. with average rents coming close to $1,500 for a small one-bedroom apartment. Unfortunately, the average salary in Beijing caps off at about $1,400, which makes everything else seem incredibly expensive. Number 9, Geneva, Switzerland. If you thought Geneva was cheap, you better think again. Geneva comes in on 9th in this list, purely because the city and the country have been known for luxury throughout the ages. Geneva also caters to some of the most powerful decision makers on the planet, housing what used to be the UN headquarters before they moved it to New York. The UN office still very much exists and is used for a lot of the UN's affairs. Being accommodative towards these world officials have resulted in the uprise of several luxury inputs all over the city. It's like the government made sure that the entire city would be luxurious enough to accommodate these world leaders. That being said, the average rent in Geneva is around $2,500 and the average cost per square meter is about $14,000. But on the flip side, the average income here is about $7,000, which makes living in the city expensive but affordable. Number 8, Bern, Switzerland. Another city from the land of luxury, Switzerland, is their national capital, Bern. Bern is built around a crook in the Aire River. It traces its origins back to the 12th century with medieval architecture preserved all over the city. The official language in Bern is the Swiss variety of Standard German, but the most spoken language is Bernese German. The average rent in Bern is around $2,700,000, and the average cost per square meter is about $10,000, which is a lot considering the average income here is lesser than their cousins in Geneva at about $5,400, which makes living in the city expensive overall. When we talk about an average restaurant meal here, you'll have to shell out just over $100, and just a sightseeing ride around the city in a taxi will cost you well over $150, so make sure you're prepared. Number 7, Shanghai, China. Have you watched Shanghai Nights? You know, the one with Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan? Well, they don't really show any of the actual city in that film, but it is set in the early 1900s and man, has the city changed in 100 years. The city right now is one of the most bustling cosmopolitan cities in the world, boasting skyscrapers for days. Shanghai on China's central coast is the country's biggest city and a global financial hub, which kinda means it's crazy expensive. The average rent in Shanghai is around $2,000 and the average cost per square meter is about $15,000. Which is once again quite expensive as the average income is at about $1,600. That's like peanuts compared to how much rent costs. An average restaurant meal here is over $35, which eases the pain for that super high real estate cost, and a sightseeing ride around the city cost in a taxi will be around $30, quite affordable when you put the real estate prices into perspective. Number 6, New York City, USA. The Big Apple, the world's equivalent city of dreams. It doesn't get much bigger and better than this. New York City has always been on top of the charts of the most expensive cities to live in, and it isn't just because of the several pop culture references that we've probably heard of over the last 3 decades. It's because of the sheer development the city has seen over the past century. The city is this expensive because it's literally like the business capital of the world. New York City comprises 5 boroughs sitting where the Hudson River meets the Atlantic Ocean. At its core is Manhattan, a densely populated borough that's among the world's major commercial, financial, and cultural centers. That being said, the average rent in New York City is a whopping $5,000, and the average cost per square meter is about $13,000, which is pretty expensive as the average income just about tips the $6,000 mark. That really isn't fair compared to how much real estate costs. An average restaurant meal here is just over $100, which kind of is justified because the city boasts some of the best well-known and awarded restaurants on the planet. A sightseeing ride around the city in an iconic New York City taxi will cost you well over $50. Which in this case is decently affordable when you put the real estate prices into perspective. Number 5. Singapore. This Southeast Asian gem of a city is actually also a country, being one of the 3 sovereign city-states that exist in the world right now. Singapore is a marvel when it comes to technological advancements, boasting some of the world's most developed infrastructure and administrational policies that the world is yet to learn. It's taken a while for Singapore to get on the map of many, but when it did, the city became an international wonder. It's a key point for businesses who are interested in the Asian markets, and is also considered to be one of the most important cities in the world. All of that, of course, comes with the price. The average rent in Singapore is around $5,000, and the average cost per square meter is about $18,000, which is definitely expensive as the average income is just about $5,000. This, once again, isn't really fair compared to how much real estate costs here. An average restaurant meal here is just over $70. I mean, it does house some of the most diverse cuisines in Asia, but when you think about it, it could be cheaper. A sightseeing ride around the city in a taxi will cost you over $50. Affordable, once again, when you put the real estate prices into perspective. Number 4. Zurich, Switzerland. Wow, no wonder Switzerland is the land of luxury. This is the 3rd Swiss city on the list and probably the most popular out of the 3. Don't get me wrong, Geneva and Bern are popular in their own ways, but Zurich probably stands out the most when it comes to international popularity, notably because it is a global center for banking and finance. The city lies at the north end of the Lake Zurich in northern Switzerland and is home to some of the richest people in the world, tangled with streets and architecture that are drenched in history. When we talk about numbers, the average rent in Zurich is around $3,500 and the average cost per square meter is about $15,000, which isn't as expensive as the other cities on this list, but what really stands out is how much you'll actually spend otherwise in the city. The average income is at a stable $7,500, which makes living in the city quite affordable. But here's a catch: an average restaurant meal here is just over $130. I mean, it is a land of luxury. A sightseeing ride around in a taxi will cost you well over $150. Affordable for the pay that's received, but certainly not if you're just a visitor to the city. Number 3. Tokyo, Japan. There's no surprise this city's on this list. Tokyo always manages to include itself when it comes to the most expensive cities. Tokyo for the longest time was the most expensive city in the world, along with the largest population and area-wide city on the planet as well. It's kind of a no-brainer as to why the city is so expensive. I mean, the city houses 37 million people. That's nearly a quarter of Japan's entire population. So living here is going to be really expensive. From real estate to even just everyday activities is going to cost a lot. Let's look at a few numbers. The average rent in Tokyo is around $2,800 and the average cost per square meter is about $12,000, which again isn't as expensive as other cities on this list. But what really stands out is how much you'll earn in the city. The average income here is just tipping the $3.2 thousand mark, which makes living in the city pretty darn expensive if you ask me. That's like $500 more than the average rent. On the flip side, there's the catch. An average restaurant meal here is just over $50, which is a relief compared to how much you earn and how much you have to spend on a place to stay. A sightseeing ride around in a taxi will cost you around $60. Affordable, but could be cheaper compared to how much you get paid here. Number 2. Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. This one came as a total surprise to everyone, including me. For some of us, we haven't even heard of Ashgabat. Heck, I think there are a lot of us who probably haven't heard of even Turkmenistan. But that kind of shows how ignorant we are about the wonderful world we have around us. Turkmenistan is a country in Central Asia by the Caspian Sea and largely covered by the Karakum Desert, bordering the countries Uzbekistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, the latter two being popular for reasons otherwise. Turkmenistan is known for its archaeological ruins, including major stops along the ancient trade route, the Silk Road. Its capital, Ashgabat, was rebuilt in Soviet style in the mid-20th century and is filled with grand monuments. Looking at the numbers, Ashgabat is placed so high on this list because of its rent to real estate prices compared to how much an average person in the city earns. The average rent in Ashgabat is around $1,000. The average cost per square meter is about $2,000, which is practically nothing compared to other cities on this list, but on the flip side, the average income here is about $500, nearly half of what the average rent is and a quarter of how much the real estate values are, which makes living in this city incredibly expensive. Number 1. Hong Kong. Taking our top spot is a city that's drastically become more expensive in the past decade because of its sheer real estate demand. Hong Kong is officially a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, a metropolitan area and special administrative region of China on the eastern Pearl River Delta in South China that has grown exponentially over the years and now is probably one of the most population congested cities in the world, which is why it's at number 1. The demand for rentals and real estate in this city is incredibly high. The densely populated city has over 7 million residents living on just 1,100 square kilometers. With such a low supply and high demand for living space, Hong Kong's housing prices almost have no chance to come down. Let's look at a few numbers. The average rent in Hong Kong is around $4,000, which isn't why it's overly expensive. I mean, if you look at it, other cities on this list outshine the average rent cost, but what really takes the cake is the average cost per square meter, which is an incredible $32,000, easily making it the most expensive place to live in the world. On the other hand, the average income here is about $3,000, 3/4 of what the average rent is and almost 1/10 of how much the real estate values are, which makes living in the city incredibly expensive and, well, sometimes not even worth it. Needless to say, Hong Kong is turning out to be an international trading, finance, and business hub, catering to people from all across the globe. So these crazy numbers aren't going down anytime soon. On a better note, an average restaurant meal here is just over $65, which is a relief compared to how much you earn and how much you have to spend on a place to stay. A sightseeing ride around the city in a taxi will cost you around $30. Super affordable.